Hi, I'm Marc Mulligan and I'm a Quality Manager here at the Money and Pension Service. In this video, I will be talking about standards 4H and 4I and what they mean for guidance services. First, let's begin by differentiating between 4H and 4I. 4H relates to information and guidance given generally throughout a consumer's interaction, whereas 4I 1, 2 and 3 are specifically about the options a consumer may have. Now, for many consumers using guidance services, they will have multiple options available to them, the range and scope of which cannot always be defined as advice is not given. Therefore, to make these standards work for guidance, we have defined options as only relating to the 6 standard options presented during a pension-wise appointment as ways of possibly accessing a defined contribution pension pot. So, what does this mean for guidance services when it comes to assessing standards 4H and 4I? 4H should be assessed for accuracy, sufficiency and relevancy of the guidance given across all tiers for all interactions. For pension-wise specifically though, 4H does not relate to those 6 options. 4I 1, 2 and 3 should only ever be assessed for pension-wise, and then only assessed for those 6 options. Any other guidance given during a pension-wise appointment will be assessed under 4H. And finally, 4I4 and 4I5 could apply to all tiers and services, but more on this in a moment. Let's now focus on 4H, which will be applicable to all guidance services. 4H1 is looking at the accuracy of information. Now, accuracy is defined within Appendix 2 of the toolkit. We recognise that sometimes guidance services may want to give an estimate of a figure to aid the consumer's understanding. Examples of this may include the average amount needed for retirement, as researched by Pensions UK, or a typical amount of an annual management charge for a pension. But as these figures aren't set in stone and can sometimes be a range, we would still consider the information given to be accurate as long as it isn't positioned as definitive and the service can reference where it came from. 4H2 is looking at the sufficiency of information. Here, assessors should be asking themselves, was enough information provided for the consumer to make an informed decision? Was there anything missing that could have affected the consumer's decision making? When looking at this standard, assessors should also consider the context of the service being delivered. For example, it isn't expected that a Tier 1 money guider engages in a question about pensions tax relief, but instead they should refer or warm transfer the consumer to pensions guidance. Similarly, a pension-wise guider isn't expected to go into lots of information about defined benefit pensions because the topic is out of scope for the service. Again, a referral to pension guidance would be appropriate. But please note that referrals are dealt with in standard 4I5. The last of the 4H's is 4H3, and this time we're looking at the relevancy of the guidance. And you can find MaPS's definition of relevant within Appendix 2 of the toolkit. Now on to 4I. As mentioned previously, the first 3 standards in 4I will only apply to pension-wise appointments for guidance services. And even then, it only applies to the 6 options in the pension-wise appointment content. For clarity, these are delay taking the pension, buying an annuity, taking the pension as income drawdown, uncrystallised funds pension lump sum, otherwise known as UF+, taking it all in one go, and a mixing of those options. 4I1 is only looking at whether all available options have been correctly identified as available. For most pension-wise appointments, this will be all 6, but in some circumstances, such as where there is an inherited pot, 1 or more options may not be available. Now, there is no requirement to go into any detail of these unavailable options, although they should be briefly mentioned in case the consumer had prior knowledge of those options. Standard 4I2 focuses on providing sufficient and accurate guidance on the available options. Sufficiency should be based on the current appointment content as well as the definition contained within Appendix 2 of the toolkit. And finally, 4I3 is gaining a positive indication that the consumer has understood their available options. This can be simply through confirmation questions such as, "Does that make sense?" or "Do you have any questions?" It's not necessary to check the consumer's understanding beyond this. However, if the consumer has clearly misunderstood an option, for example, they've repeated back something to the practitioner which is incorrect, the consumer should be politely corrected. Now, as mentioned previously, the rest of 4I could apply to all services. 4I4 looks at next steps. If no next steps were discussed with the consumer, for example, where the guidance provided was a simple answer to a question, then this standard might be marked as not applicable. In some services, there will always be next steps, such as pension appointment booking, pension-wise, or a pension safeguarding appointment. Whether or not the service has carried out actions to be delivered is also assessed here. Examples here include the promise to send a follow-up email or a confirmation of an appointment amendment. For pension-wise and pension safeguarding appointments, it's usually expected that sending a summary document is a next step for the service to carry out, and so it would be assessed here. Guidance services should also be careful with the advice-guidance boundary, as wrongly positioning a next step may cross that line. For example, in order to benefit from the current year's ISA allowance, you will need to deposit your funds before the 6th of April. Now that is on the right side of the boundary, whereas you must deposit your money before the 6th of April to get the best result would not. And finally, 4I5 focuses on the proactive signposting to other sources of information. Now these could be a range of external or internal resources. For pension-wise appointments, it is expected that they will always refer to the Pension Guidance Service, and so this would be assessed here. Well, that's everything for now. I really hope this video has helped your understanding of the 4H and 4I standards and how they apply to guidance services. For more information, please go to the MaPS Standards page on maps.org.uk.